Welcome everyone. Namaste. Good evening, good afternoon. Wherever you are in the world, we welcome you to this very important webinar which has been organized by Disability and Development Consortium India on poverty, hunger and disability, the missing link. Today we have a panel of luminaries who are going to share their thoughts with us. Quickly, this is the program for the evening. We have a lot of different stalwarts from different sectors who have joined in, and we welcome all of you. It's not possible to actually name every one of you, but in the participant list, you'll see all of them. So welcome once again. See, the 2030 agenda is talking about, or it pledges that no one should be left behind, leave no one behind, including persons with disabilities. And actually it has recognized disability as cross-cutting issue. And in all the 17 goals and the implementation of the goals, they have considered disability as one of the important areas. So there are two SDGs. One is talking on poverty, SDG 1, and it talks about ending poverty in all its forms. And SDG 2, to end hunger. So this, almost 7 years ago, 2015, we signed this. What is happening? What has happened in the last 7 years? Have we reached to a stage where we can say that we are actually doing what we have signed for? And the question is, if we have not done it, why we have not done it? What is the missing link? And today we have these six luminaries who are going to talk to us and share their thoughts. So before I go on to my first presenter, I would like to request Kiran Patidar ji, who is going to take us through the welcome address. Kiran ji from MP Viklang Merge, Ratlam.
Good evening, Shubh Prabhat, Vishisht Atithi, ladies and gentlemen and friends. डिसेबिलिटी एंड डेवलपमेंट कंसोर्टियम की ओर से मुझे आप सभी का स्वागत करते हुए बहुत खुशी हो रही है। विशेष रूप से सुश्री अरुणा राय जी, जीन ड्रेज जी, श्री प्रवीण कुमार जी, सुश्री फ्रांजिस्का मगर जी, केतन कोठारी जी और श्री अमिताभ बेहर जी, हमारे पैनलिस्ट आज हमारे साथ रहने के लिए आपने अपना अमूल्य समय निकाला। इसके लिए हम वास्तव में आप पांचों की सराहना करते हैं। यह उन अवसरों में से एक है जहां आप जैसे विशिष्ट इच्छा वक्ताओं को विकलांगता क्षेत्र द्वारा इस वेबिनार जैसे कार्यक्रम के लिए आमंत्रित किया गया है। जितना अधिक हम मुख्य धारा से जुड़ेंगे, उतना ही अधिक विकलांगता के क्षेत्र के लिए अपने उद्देश्य को आगे बढ़ाने का अवसर होगा। हम आपसे अनुरोध करते हैं कि आप हमारे साथ जुड़े रहें। विकलांगता और विकास संघ भारत विकलांग व्यक्तियों ओपीडी, उनके माता पिता और परिवार के राष्ट्रीय एवं क्षेत्रीय संगठनों से बना है। वर्तमान में 10 ओपीडी है। आपके समर्थन से हम विकलांग व्यक्तियों, उनके माता पिता, परिवार और उनके संगठन के ग्लोबल साउथ की आवाज बनने के लिए ताकत से बढ़ेंगे। आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू वेरी मच किरण जी, आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। And now I request two of my great colleagues to give opening remarks. First of all, Mr. B. Venkatesh, whom we call Venky. He is founder of ADD, Action on Disability and Development, and he is honorary convener for Indian Forum for Rehabilitation and Assistive Technologies, IFRA, which is partnering with DDC today, and also honorary president of CVR Global Network. So over to you, Venki.
Thank you very much. Greetings of the day. Thank you very much for being with us here today. We are here today to take stock of the inclusion of disability in the Sustainable Development Goals, where we have done well and where we could have done better. As you all know, disability did not even find a mention in the Millennium Development Goals. Considering this omission, we can be proud that because of our advocacy, disability is included in 5 goals and 7 targets and 11 mentions in the Sustainable Development Goals. But the absence of disability in Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, and 3 leaves the majority of the population with disabilities, many of them living in poverty, behind. So much so, they risk not being counted in policies, programs, and financing of food security and health. If they are not counted, they don't count. This advocacy and webinar is to remind the global community of this grave omission. Is this omission an indictment on the disability community, civil society, and governments? The answer is yes. No right can be exercised without right to life being guaranteed. To state the obvious, right to food security, shelter and clothing guarantees right to life. The purpose of this webinar is to try and set this wrong right and to ensure that poverty and hunger are at the center of the global disability discourse, which it is not. The global disability discourse currently does not even recognize poverty explicitly as a factor and a major barrier to persons with disabilities. We have reasons to be grateful and hopeful to end poverty and hunger for all on 2 counts. The recent agreement, international agreement on minimum corporate tax to be fixed at 15% per annum, and the continuing global conversation on universal basic income. At the same time, we also need to be vigilant to act collectively against two huge barriers among many. Disproportionate spending on defense. Example, the defense expenditure worldwide during the height of the pandemic was estimated to be $3 trillion US, and more worryingly, some schools of thought predict that democracy is on the decline. Equality and justice are pillars of democracy. Should the disability sector join forces to reverse this trend and combat corruption and blatant violation of democratic principles and values and basic human rights? The answer is a resounding yes. We must always remember that disability rights needs to be embedded in the wider socio-political reality, because it is this very reality that is the source of the injustice that persons with disabilities face every day. The Disability and Development Consortium, India, is committed to advocate to end poverty and hunger and discrimination against all persons with disabilities. We count on your support. I wish to thank in advance our panel for their willingness to be here and to share their thoughtful assessment of what is happening with respect to poverty and hunger in the world today and what we can do collectively to remove fear and insecurity from a world full of paranoia and combat crimes of greed. Before we proceed, shall we observe a moment's silence to honor the dignity of those who are experiencing hunger and disease, even as we speak.
Thank you very much, Venki.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind words. We have another opening remarks from our friend and colleague, Arman Ali, who is Executive Director of National Center for Promotion of Employment for Disabled People, a young dynamo himself. He has been on UNESCO editorial board. He has sat on many government committees, high-powered committees, and also made a lot of difference in the lives of people with disabilities through his advocacy. So, Arman, over to you.
Thank you, Akhil. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And to take it forward from what Venki has to say, just to reiterate the points, one, I must recognize that all the OPDs, Organization of Persons with Disabilities, who's come together to form DDC, is a step forward towards making the right real for people with disability. And when we talk about poverty, hunger, and disability, and the missing link, recognition of poverty as the main barrier for persons with disability has a long history. If we look at the 2011 World Report of Disability, which estimates 15% of the world population has some form of disability, out of which 80% of whom live in the middle, low-income countries. With at least 20% of the families living in poverty includes persons with disability. Others that highlight the factors are the insurance strategy first goal to reduce poverty, and enhance work and employment prospect to, that is to 2013 to 2022, and the joint position paper in 2004 by WHO, ILO, and UNESCO on community-based rehabilitation, which redefined CBR to include poverty reduction, sustainable development goals, recognizing persons with disability as vulnerable groups. Many of the gains made in reducing poverty and increasing inequality and literacy over the last few decades have been lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And obviously, persons with disabilities are proportionately high among the population affected adversely by this pandemic. Despite the global discourse on disability, which does not include poverty and hunger as a major barrier for persons with disability. For example, the UN Disability Inclusive Strategy, the disability section of UNDESA agenda, that is the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the Sustainable Development Goal, SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 2, which talks about no hunger, SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. Unless this grave omissions is rectified squarely, these concerns will remain unaddressed by the global community and individual countries, leaving millions of people with disabilities with no access to social protection measures. Although there's no doubt that the themes of the second Global Disability Summit are in line with the CBR metrics, poverty is not recognized as a major barrier for the persons with disabilities. On the screen, I am sharing a slide which has the themes of the Global Disability Summit on the left of the screen and the CBR metrics on the right. If you look the main points of, if you look at the CBR metrics, it talks about health, education, livelihood, social and empowerment. And the themes of the Global Disability Summit is again inclusive education, inclusive health, inclusive employment and livelihood, strengthening of OPDs in the global south, and inclusion in situations of crisis and conflict, including a focus on climate change. So there is similarities there, and we are hopeful that with this GDS, more and more people will realize, that there is hardly anyone here, and also here that who has not experienced the value of a stranger, neighbor, a family member, and the community during the COVID pandemic. Community has always stood by for most of us, especially for those who are vulnerable. Given this reality, CBR, community-based rehabilitation and community-based inclusive development, is the only way to reach millions of people with disabilities everywhere, so that they can live with dignity, equality, and justice. Thank you so much. I welcome everybody again, and I am really looking forward to listening to each of the panelists. Thank you so much. Over to you, Akhil.
Thank you very much, Arman. Thank you very much for your kind words.